Listening to Bad Dog Agility, bringing you training tips, interviews, and news about the great sport of dog agility.
I'm Esteban.
And I'm Sarah, and this is episode 255. Today's podcast is brought to you by hititboard.com. Hititboard.com has the innovative training tools you need for agility. Having problems with the dog walker A-frame? The Hititboard can fix that. Your dog doesn't like tugging? They'll love the Tug It. Can't move your A-frame around by yourself? The Move It can. Go to hititboard.com and use discount code BDA10 to get 10% off your order. That's hititboard.com.
Today we're going to be talking about wearing masks in dog agility. And I need to start with the disclaimer. And it's that all information has been researched, but it's not exhaustive. It's not been reviewed by an outside expert other than myself. Although I am a licensed physician, this is not medical advice, and it's very important for you to understand this. You should be getting medical advice specific to your situation and your health from your doctor, not from me or this podcast. So let's start with the very basics. Why are we talking about wearing masks? Well, we've reached that point in this pandemic where some places, some agility trials are going to be opening back up in the coming weeks and months. And 3 weeks ago, a big study came out, and the title of the study is Universal Masking is Urgent in the COVID-19 Pandemic. And they used statistical models and data. These were authors from a bunch of different countries, Hong Kong, United Kingdom, France, Finland. And what they did was they compared countries with high levels of mask wearing to ones with low levels of mask wearing. And they took all this data and they found that, hey, masks are helpful. They can reduce transmission. And the study basically concludes that if 80% of a population would wear masks, you can get a drop in infection rates approaching like 90%. Right. So this is not just a little bit helpful. This is very, 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 very helpful. And so in recent weeks, the CDC has reversed, and that would be the Centers for Disease Control here in the United States, have basically reversed their position on masks, right? Early on in the pandemic, they were like, no masks, no masks. Nobody needs masks. Save all the masks for the medical health professionals. That is still the case. So your N95 mask, we're going to talk about that a little bit more very soon. Save those for the healthcare providers, the frontline workers, the people who are actually known to be ill. And we've got to save the, kind of the medical grade level stuff for those people. But what about homemade stuff? And at the time, and this annoys me a lot, right? And because the CDC at the time was like, well, that's not very helpful. We're just not going to do that. Or it might, right. It might give you a false sense of security, and then you may, not wash your hands as much. You may not social distance as much. You may go about all your activities and really not slow down the spread of the disease, which are valid points. But this study kind of tells us a different story. And so I think that there is still some skepticism, even in the medical community, about this. But the attitude here in the United States is certainly shifting quite a bit. And I think in that sense, we've learned a lot from predominantly Asian countries, where the culture very much is when you are sick, you can wear a mask, and people aren't going to freak out if you're sitting on the bus and you're wearing a mask. Right. And so we're kind of moving in that direction. And so that's a little bit about the studies. Now, we're going to have links and provide all the documentation to everything that we're talking about, so you can go and look at it yourself. And, some other things that we'll get to now. So first, we want to, now that we've kind of got the reasons why mask wearing is happening and going to be happening, let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is the etiquette and politics concerning masks. Because masks here in this country, at least, maybe not so much in other countries, but in this country, the United States of America has become a political lightning rod, where for groups of people, I would say not most people, but for some groups of people, it has become a tool of political expression rather than a tool of public health.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it, right? It's wearing a mask is a statement rather than something that you're doing to slow the spread of this disease.
Right. Wearing it and not wearing it.
Right.
Both
exactly.
both sides of that coin. And so, in our view, I think that's something that we need to get away from.
Right. And
because
I think
there's a real public health utility, meaning it is useful and helpful to wear masks.
Not only do we need to get away from it because it is useful and helpful from a public health perspective, but we need to get away from it because in a lot of places and in a lot of ways, it doesn't matter because the use of masks is required in certain scenarios, right? So some businesses may require you to wear it. Some agility organizations may require you to wear it. The little foreshadowing here, because we're going to get to all of that. But so it kind of doesn't matter what your personal viewpoint on it is. You are going to have to follow the rules and the regulations of your local places of business, local governments, and things like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I'll just say I'm an Army brat, father in the military, in the Army, 34 years. And, if mask wearing is good enough for the military, it's good enough for this guy. Okay. So wearing a mask, and this is a key point that I want to put out there, wearing a mask does not give sick people permission to attend a trial. And I think when the CDC first came out and said, we really don't need these masks, they can do more harm than good. This is what they were really thinking about. And this still holds true. So if you're feeling a little under the weather, you're a little suspicious, but you're thinking to yourself, this is a cold. This isn't that thing. I don't have COVID. I don't have coronavirus. I'm just going to, I have my mask. I'm okay to go to this trial. That's not the way to think about this, right? If you're not feeling well, stay at home. Closely related to this, allergies can look a lot like upper respiratory infections, like the cold, like the flu, like coronavirus. So they look similar. And I've had my colleague doctors tell me this by text message and on the phone and say, and my allergies got real bad and I started, coughing a lot and sneezing a lot. And how people would react. So, I had to be careful and I had to make sure I wore my mask and that sort of thing. And you can see what a difficult position that essential personnel are in. What do you do if you're a police officer, EMS, a physician, and that when you go down, if you took yourself out for 2 weeks, right, which is the quarantine period for suspected infection, what happens to your team? What happens to your ability to provide frontline care for people who actually have the infection? It's devastating, and these are tough decisions for those people to make. But guess what? You don't have to make that decision as a dog agility competitor. Non-essential. So just a reminder, you are non-essential. Assume you are sick and stay home. Don't assume the best case. Don't assume that it's allergies only. Assume that you are sick and you're going to get someone else sick. And there's a 2% chance that that person is going to die. I don't want to be the person who mistakes my COVID infection for allergies. And then I go to a trial, I get someone I know and care about and have done agility with for years, and I get them sick, and then I find out later that they died. All right. So risk tolerance is also key. This is the next bullet point that I have here, but this is very subjective. It's based on your own personal risk factors. If you're older, as a lot of people here in the United States are who do agility, if you have high blood pressure, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, if you're on taking any kind of immunosuppressive medications for, say, cancer, I think is probably the best example that I can think of. You're obviously at higher risk. If you are young, if you are healthy, if you have no issues with your lung or your heart, then you are at lower risk. But understand that even people at lower risk can get sick. Most importantly, there was a study that came out fairly early. This would be 6 to 8 weeks by now, out of South Korea, that showed that the majority of asymptomatic carriers were aged 20 to 29. That means that there were a lot of people walking around. They had the virus. They were actively getting other people sick. They had absolutely no idea. They tended to be younger. And because they were younger and healthier and had that attitude of, I'm not at risk, they were more likely to be out and in these places. So I don't think it was anything physical about them. It was more about the choices that they made based on their perception of being low risk, right? Which makes sense. So yes, to them, they are low risk, but to everyone else, they were the silent carriers that ultimately led to the infections that killed other people, the older at-risk people. Eventually, it's going to trickle the infection is going to trickle their way back to those nursing homes and assisted living facilities and hospitals. Okay. I want everyone out there to understand right now that you are likely going to be unhappy at your first agility trial back for two different reasons. Either you feel that there are not enough rules in place, or you're there at the trial and you're seeing too many violations, little violations, people taking off their masks to have a snack, eat, talk with each other, or people standing very close to each other and talking, and you know they don't live together. So you don't feel comfortable being there because you are afraid of getting the virus. If that's the case, if that's how you're going to feel about it, stay home. You are not ready to go back to agility trials. The other side of that, the other reason that you're going to be unhappy, you're going to feel that there are too many rules in place and that they are unnecessary. So you don't feel comfortable being at the trial because the other people at the trial are getting upset with you for bending or breaking the rules. Like you want to talk to your friend you're just talking for 5 seconds by the door and people are suddenly giving you dirty looks that you are congregating by the door or that you're taking a quick snack to eat because you're at the trial for 8 hours straight and you feel like you need to remove your mask in order to eat. If you are this person, stay home. You are not ready to go back to agility trials. And I think we took a sample statement from an AKC Premium that is going to host a trial, I think, in July. It's a great quote. I'm going to read it to you word for word. If you are concerned about the possibility of exposure to the coronavirus, or, and they capitalize or, if you are unwilling to follow the stated rules, it would be best if you did not enter this July trial. And in my view, that's the quote. In my view, every personal situation, no matter what it is, no matter what opinion you have, what political party you affiliate with, every personal situation is addressed by that statement.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect statement. And I think just to echo everything that you just said, you have to be, if you want to go back to trialing, you have to be comfortable. Absolutely. You need to stay safe. Absolutely. You also need to be willing to follow the rules that are set in place. You should know about them before you enter. And if you're not willing to follow those rules, you should not be entering the trial.
That's right. Now, let's start with some of the CDC guidelines. This is CDC guidelines. This is very important. I'm just picking out this one specific guideline. Who should wear masks? Officially, people older than 2 years of age in public settings where other social distancing measures are difficult to maintain. There's a lot to unpack there, but the key here for us is agility trials. That is a public setting where social distancing measures are going to be difficult to maintain.
And all the competitors are over 2 years old.
and everyone's going to be over 2 years old. The place that I think it's going to be the hardest, there's going to be several. In and out of doors, which is why you're seeing people, trials designate certain doors as going in, certain doors as going out. The swimming pool at our gym is reopening. They're going to let kids in there, but they're closing the bathrooms. No congregation of the kids or gathering of the kids or team. They used to do like a team cheer. Everybody get your hands in the middle and go team. And there's none of that. They're all going to be separate. They're all going to have to wear masks all the way down to when they're about to get in. Then they can remove the mask. It's one child per lane, but they all come in through one door and they all leave out through the other door and not at the same time. So they've got a whole system set up there. That's what you're looking at seeing in trials. Now, not every trial is doing that. I think though that every trial should. That's just opinion. But here we have a good sense of who should be wearing masks, because when you're at a trial and you are, say, course walking, you're going to not be able to maintain the physical distance between people. It's going to happen, right?
And
there's going to be that one tough part of the course where everybody kind of congregates.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if you do maintain that 6 feet, you are constantly moving into the space that somebody else just vacated. So even if you could somehow time it so that everybody stayed exactly 6 feet apart, you are moving in the same area in a short amount of time.
Exactly. And we're going to get to why that's important. And we're going to talk a little bit about air droplets and air, because that's what masks are all about. The next part of the CDC guidelines, who should not wear masks? And this is very, very important, especially in my view, for people who think everybody should be wearing masks. All right. Anyone who has trouble breathing or is unconscious, incapacitated, or otherwise unable to remove the mask without assistance. Okay. And in my opinion, if you are one of these people, you fall under this category. You have asthma, you have COPD, you require oxygen and things like that. In my opinion, I'm sorry, but these people should not be at agility trials because they are at very high risk for developing complications from coronavirus infection. All right. If you happen to be one of these people, you go with or without a mask and you get sick, you are at extremely high risk for death. And even if you do not die, serious complications related to that. Okay. Now that we have said that, let's talk about more general considerations. This is for the masks themselves. So at this point, we've talked to you up to this point. You should be beginning to understand that in the world, our kind of global picture, and especially here in the United States, until we get a vaccine, that masks are going to become a part of our daily lives. Yes, there's a lot of political conflict right now. I expect this to kind of actually smooth away as more and more research comes out showing the benefits of mask wearing and the extreme social pressure that people will have to wear masks, even if they disagree politically with some people who advocate mask wearing at all times. So general considerations now, this is for the masks themselves. What are some things that you need to think about? I'm going to start with the very generic line that the CDC gives and explain to you why it's so important and what it means for you specifically. So number one, fit snugly. We want the mask to fit snugly but comfortably against the side of the face. This is a really big deal. If you're not comfortable, you're going to keep fiddling with the mask and you're going to inadvertently touch your face. You need it to fit snugly. Why do we want it to be a snug fit? Because if it is not, and there's air gaps, especially up around the nose, especially for those of us with more pointed or prominent nose bridges, and there's a gap, when you breathe in, even if you're breathing in a very high quality mask, like the N95, for example, medical grade level, because it's harder for the air to come through the filtered part, the mask part, you're just going to suck in a lot of air through those cracks. And guess what? That's unfiltered air loaded with the virus, potentially. Okay, and that's why we need a good snug fit. So comfort is important, and you and I and the kids are using out in low risk areas a mask made by a company, Cap 7, and they make suits and water polo and swimming stuff. And what they did was they basically took swimsuit material and made masks out of them. And
really comfortable.
They're very comfortable, very lightweight, very easy to breathe, especially for those of you who tend to get claustrophobic. I'm mildly claustrophobic myself, so I can definitely empathize with you. The material is 82% polyester, 18% elastane, and we put a link in the show notes page where you can get it. Very, very comfortable, and it uses straps. We'll get to that in just a second. But really now is shopping time. Children, they need their own fitted sizes. So we have tried to put adult masks on Hannah, and they just fall off. There's huge gaps, completely useless in a situation. Let's say we all had to go to the hospital for some reason, right? And she would be at extreme risk where the others of us, we would have reduced risk because our masks actually fit. Having said that, agility people, leave your children at home, right? They don't belong at agility trials, especially if they're under the age of 2. If you're carrying an infant, like we've taken our infant children years and years ago.
Back in the day.
Right. That it's not the time to do that. Leave your guests at home. Now's not the time to show off agility to your mom, your dad, your neighbor, or anything like that. Leave your guests at home. In fact, many of the trials have written this into their rules. Competitors only. No family members. Okay. Let's talk about multiple layers of fabric because they mention that explicitly. And so there comes a point where you have too many layers of fabric and you just can't breathe very well, right? It's a little bit suffocating. And one thing you can do is put a mask insert. You can put in something called a PM 2.5 N95 activated carbon filter mask insert. You can actually purchase 100 of them for $100 and put them in your mask. Well, what kind of mask does this require? It requires a 2-layer mask with kind of a pocket that you can slip the filter into. And then when you're done for the day, you throw the filter away. It's done, one use only. And then you go and wash your mask, the actual mask itself. Now, I need to update this. This is a typo, but it blocks at least 95% of viruses. This is just a regular N95 mask. And presumably the insert is going to give you the same effect. But it blocks 95% of viruses as small as 0.3 microns. 0.3 microns is tiny. So for those of you who don't know, viruses are much smaller than bacteria. Bacteria are huge, right? These masks are great against bacteria, awful against viruses. Viruses are even smaller than 0.3 microns. So now you got to be wondering, okay, well, hey, if these awesome masks, the N95 mask blocks 0.3 microns, things that are bigger than that, but viruses are smaller than 0.3 microns, how is it possibly blocking out 95% of them? Well, it turns out that the viruses aren't just floating out there in space. They are on water droplets, and the water droplets are 5 to 10 microns, which is like 0.3, 10, 30 times bigger than the size of the hole in these masks. Right? So the water droplets don't get through. Therefore, most of the viruses are not getting through because they're attached to the water droplets. This is an easy experiment for you to do. Breathe on your hand. Hold your hand, a couple inches from your face. Breathe on your hand. Then put a pillowcase or a towel or anything between your hand and your breath, and now breathe on it. You're not going to feel the warmth. You're not going to feel the moisture coming out from your hand or your mouth hitting your hand. Okay? So it's something that everyone can intuitively understand. Your masks they block droplets. That is how they work because the virus needs the droplets. That's how it gets around. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. It's a very important point and a lot of people don't seem to understand it. Vacuum bags. You may be reading about the HEPA vacuum bags, HEPA, basically the ultrafiltration ones where people with allergies are supposed to use these special vacuum bags, pay a little extra and vacuum your house. Those are actually hard to breathe through, but those are the closest ones to the medical grade N95. Like if the N95 is a 9 out of 10, then these vacuum filters are an 8 out of 10. They're really, really close. You're going to secure the mask. This is the next point, with either ties or ear loops. And we found that the masks that had ear loops, like rubber ear loops, you just put them around your ear. I can't think of, they're kind of like glasses. They curl around your ear.
Right.
Are pretty useless because they're very uncomfortable. The rubber will pull your ear forward and cause a lot of discomfort, and they don't fit very well.
Yeah, they're like faster to put on because you don't have anything to tie. You just slip the little hoops over your ear and you're done. But they don't fit as well. And at least you and I find them to be less comfortable.
Right. And so we prefer the ties. And so this is another typo that I'm going to fix. The word ties here needs to be here instead of loops.
And he's looking here at a document that he's put together as our guide for the podcast, but we're also going to provide this document to you guys in the show notes. You can download the PDF yourself so you can print it out and have it because it's going to have a lot of the key points that we're going over and also the sources and links.
Right. Because basically I'm telling you how we're living and how we expect to live in certain situations, including like if I were going to go to a dog agility trial, exactly what I would do. And so we need to allow for breathing without restriction. I think that's a big deal. So you want to be able to breathe comfortably. But like I said, there is a psychological component to breathing with a mask on. And a lot of people say they can't do it. They can't do it. Then that's perfectly understandable. And there are certainly people that are like that. But guess what? Those people don't become surgeons, right? Because surgeons have to wear masks. You can't do certain medical procedures unless you're in a mask and gown in the hospital setting. And if you can't do that, then you can't do that. But we don't let you do it without a mask. Do you understand? So if an organization or a trial makes a rule that everyone has to wear masks and you cannot wear the mask, guess what? You should not be at that trial. End of story. Okay. Remove very carefully. Don't touch the mask part. Just touch the ties. And this is very critical, especially with us, because we're only in low risk situations, and especially watching the other people who are not me. And that would be the other 3 people in my family, especially the
without
kids.
medical training.
They're not removing it from the ties. Like once the mask goes on your face, you should never touch the mask part. You should just imagine in your head, the virus is just getting stuck to your mask. Every breath you take, you're sucking in virus and just trapping it on the mask, and you don't want to touch it. So now you want to touch the tie part. Carry it by the tie over to your washing machine, dump it in there, or your special container that you have set aside for your mask. Okay, so you need to remove that very carefully. I have a very cool YouTube video that I linked to you, and it's very, very good. It is a demonstration by a pulmonologist. And Dr. George demonstrates how to put it on. And it's a cloth mask, not an N95. So she shows you how to do it and tie it and how you should hold it. And it's very basic, just 2 minutes. And it makes the point very, very well. Your mask needs to be able to be laundered. You can machine dry it, and it needs to not get damaged or change shapes. So we bought, I want to say we spent $7 to $10 on some masks. And they were just garbage. The first time you wash them, they shrunk a lot and they don't even fit on your face. They wrinkled up. You can't straighten it out. And there were gaps. And I was like, this thing is useless. Basically, we have to throw them away. And so we had to get new masks. And so air drying is okay. So you can machine wash it and leave it in the sun if possible, if you're going to air dry it. Hotter is better for both washing and drying. As warm or hot a setting as you can do. I don't think you need to blast it. I think it's fine. But detergent is basically going to rip the virus apart. Okay, so, what's more important, hot or water or detergent? Detergent. Okay, so soap and water. So how are we living this in life? Well, I think of it this way. There's kind of 2 general situations for masks. Low risk and high risk. Agility trial is going to be high risk. Crowded grocery stores, high risk. You have to go keep your doctor's appointment to manage your diabetes. That's high risk, right? Because sick people tend to congregate at clinics. They go see doctors too. Walking outdoors alone, low risk, right? No one else is around. So we're using these super comfortable swimsuit material masks out in the neighborhood. There's no one around. But that's not a mask I'm going to wear at the dog agility trial, right? I'm going to get a higher quality mask. I'm going to get one that's cloth, like cotton, and probably have a double layer where I can put a filter in there. And that's going to be my higher quality mask. And I'm going to be very careful with how I remove it. Okay. Comfort, I think, is a big deal. So in your daily use situation where it would behoove you to wear a mask because masks are required, but the risk is very low, then, you would go for the comfortable. So everybody kind of understands that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe I belabor that point a little bit too much. Okay. There are special considerations that we have for dog agility. And this is, I think, super interesting. And it's interesting because I have run with a mask at AKC Nationals for the past 3 years. Obviously, this last year it was canceled. But AKC Nationals, American Kennel Club, for people who don't know, that national championship event has always been held on dirt, never indoors. And so I'm gonna let Sarah tell this story because she has a very interesting perspective that is different from mine.
Right. So, I think it's a very interesting perspective. We've basically had a dry run on masks. And like Esteban said, he was wearing an N95 mask and it was the dirt that he was concerned about. So this was due to a health event that he had and concerns that his doctor had with running on that dirt. And the choice was whether we go at all. right? And this is the height of Gitchy's career. Gitchy has a shot at podium. She's making the finals year after year. And the question is, do we not go to nationals for health reasons? And after discussing with his doctor, he decided that if he could wear a mask the entire time, that that would provide the protection that he needed. And so as longtime listeners of the podcast will know, Esteban, my husband here, is a very competitive person. He's going to go out there. He's going to work hard. He's going to put in the hours and the practice, and he wants to show up and do well. And so as soon as he found out that he was going to be going with a mask, he started practicing with a mask. So in our backyard, which is not dirt, it is grass. There is no danger to him there. But he wore a mask every time he went out, and he trained Gitchy. And this was for himself to get used to it and for Gitchy to get used to it. It changes the sound. It changes the volume of your cues. It physically looks different and could be concerning to some dogs. So he went out there and he practiced with Gitchy. But the other thing that he did, and this is the part that really impressed me. And when we talk about mental management, I often talk about this story as well. He went to the gym, which is indoors, basketball court, no danger to him there either. He went to the gym. He put on this mask. He ran sprint drills. He worked himself hard with this mask to get used to it. And it was not fun, and it was not comfortable, and he did not like the feeling of having this mask on his face while he is exerting himself, but it was what was required to be able to go to the show. And so he put in that work. Not only did he do it, but he's kind of type A personality. So not only was he doing sprints, but then he was checking his oxygen levels using an O2 monitor that he bought. And he's out there at the end of his normal workout. So he'd go and without the mask and lift weights and stuff. And at the end of every workout, he'd go to the gym and run sprints with his N95 mask. So I share that story because it emphasizes a lot of different things that we all need to be thinking about right now in terms of getting ourselves used to this, in terms of getting the dog used to it, but also because, as we mentioned before, with people who don't feel comfortable with the mask or feel like they can't wear it, I think that there are people truly who cannot wear a mask. If your doctor tells you you should not wear a mask for whatever reason, you should not wear a mask. Please don't wear it just because we said you can push through and make it. Like if you can't, you can't. But I think that the number of people who think that they can't is bigger than the number of people who actually can't. And so one of the things we're all going to have to do is get ourselves used to this new way of living, being, working, exercising, breathing with a mask. And I know that there are many clubs that are requiring masks except when you run, so that you are able to take it off when you actually run. But there are clubs and there are organizations that are not going to even allow you to run without a mask. And so we are going to need to, as a community, get used to the physical presence of the mask.
Yeah. And for people who are very excited to get back to agility, think about it this way. We had an agility trial here in Texas that we didn't attend. Our young puppies aren't ready to attend anyway. So it's not really a choice that we had to make. But they did not require masks. And so what we need to think about is this. If you're going to be at agility trials, right? And let's say that we have an event and, what I mean is like a cluster event, like a bunch of cases of infection. Yeah, an outbreak. And then it happens that they can trace it back to an agility trial. Okay. And they know that 8 people, there were 40 people there. They were probably all exposed. 8 people got sick and were confirmed COVID by test. And one of those people died. Guess what? If I'm the mayor of that city, if I'm the governor of that state, I'm going to seriously think about shutting down agility trials specifically in my state. Now, do you want to risk that? What happens if we do the opposite? Everybody wears a mask. Everybody wears it at all times. Even when you're running your dog, you go there and we never have a cluster related to an agility trial. And we're able to slowly get your trials up and running. Which one is more desirable? Okay. To me, it's a no-brainer. All right. Let's be smart about this. That is the opinion segment, here that I'm saying. Okay. I do want to address one other thing. So I talk about high risk, low risk. Masks with filters are good. These swimming suit masks are very comfortable, but pretty useless. Useless is a relative term. And the way I say it is like this. If the N95 protects you 9 out of 10, and I think the swimsuit mask is a 1 or a 2 out of 10, you're like, why bother at all? Okay. I hear you. Let's talk about this. So I'm saying the N95 mask, let's take 100 people. Okay. If it's a 9 out of 10, that's 90 out of 100. Okay. So maybe 10 people get infected. Right. And let's just assume that infection is 100% death every time you get it. Okay. 10 people, they die, but 90 made it, right? This mask is good. Okay. Now I got the bogus mask, and let's make it as bad as possible. We give it a 1 out of 10. That's 10 out of 100. So 10 out of 100, right? They don't get it. 90 times they get it and they just die, right? You're like, oh, that's awful. But guess what? You saved 10 people.
That wouldn't have been saved.
That wouldn't have been saved. Okay. So it is doing something. Right? And that's just straight up transmission of aerosol coming from your mouth, from other people's mouth into your own mouth. Not to mention all the hopefully the side benefits that you get from the reminder. Hey, you're wearing a mask on your face because there's this thing going on. Alter your behavior, because some of these behaviors that we've been doing, even when you see someone, and we were out there walking on the block.
I was thinking about that story.
This is a great story.
It's our first time.
Big speech.
Okay, this is our first time leaving our house, right?
In weeks.
And we decided,
we're just walking around the block.
Okay, we're going to walk around the block as a family. First time we have been anywhere but our home or our backyard.
This is before the mask recommendation.
Right, before we're wearing masks. This is just going around our neighborhood, going around the block. And we decide, okay, we're going to add this to our list of things we can do. We can walk around the block. And we are being very, very cautious as a family. And we do have risk factors in our family. So we give our son we give everybody this whole speech. Okay, we're going to walk around the block. If you see somebody, you're going to cross over to the other side of the street and walk on the other side. We're not going to be near anybody. If there's somebody coming towards us and we can't walk around, we'll turn around and go back towards the house. Gave him this whole thing. It's okay that I stole your story here.
Yeah.
So we're walking around the block. We get about halfway around the block, and then there's some kid mowing the lawn across the street from us. And Isaac, our son, looks and goes, I think that might be somebody I know from school. And then the kid looks at him and he kind of half raises his hand. And then the kid's like, is that Isaac? And Isaac's like, yeah. And then he just starts to cross the street and go talk to the guy because he couldn't tell from 20 feet if it was the person that he knew.
Now they're face to face. They're 3 feet apart, and they're like, hey, blah, 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 blah.
And we're like, what are you doing? And so, sometimes these, the social niceties, you don't realize how ingrained they are. Giving somebody a hug, a handshake.
Holding the door open for somebody.
That's a good one. People are having to train themselves to let the door go. And even though there's somebody who's coming up, 6 feet behind you, because you have this socially ingrained behavior. But I think the other one that is a big deal, that you mentioned is, the mask will prevent you from touching your mouth and your nose with your hands, which is something, again, we do unconsciously.
Yeah.
So even a cloth mask.
Hundreds of times a day.
If a cloth mask
I'm touching my face right now.
If a cloth mask did nothing else but prevent you from touching your nose and your mouth, it would be worth wearing. Right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that those are important points. I think let's just go over one more time the things that you need to, in addition to getting yourself used to it, the things you need to be thinking about for your dog. So you need your dog to be comfortable with the sight of you in a mask. I can guarantee you
I haven't done this with a puppy yet. I did it for the first time. I walked by her and she was like, who are you? And I had told her good girl. And then she started wagging her tail a little bit.
Yeah.
But the golden was not sure.
Our daughter, we were doing laundry and our daughter was being silly and she like had a pile of socks in one hand and a pile of shirts in one hand. And she put a pile of clothes on her head and she was balancing them and walking to her bedroom. And the poodle thought a monster was in the house.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
She freaked out.
And started barking at her. So yes, a mask is something that some dogs are going to be uncomfortable with. Now, even if you are not wearing a mask, it is probably a good idea for you to condition your dog to seeing a mask because you know what? There are probably other people going to be wearing a mask, whether or not they are required.
Absolutely.
Where you are going, there are going to be people who are going to choose to wear it, even if it is not required. So go out there. Even if you're not going to wear a mask and it's not required where you're going, make sure that your dog is still okay.
That's just good dog training. Let's say that I am a hardcore, very political person and I think these masks are an absolute travesty and garbage, but I'm also a top level dog trainer and I know that maybe 30-40% of the people in my neighborhood are going to be wearing it. I know that at dog agility trials it's going to be required. Or not required, but that they're going to be optional. And so some people are going to wear them. As a top-notch high-level dog trainer, I'm going to make sure my dog is ready for that and can compete at the highest levels and do okay. So that just makes good sense. So even though I may not personally have a mask and I think it's ridiculous, et cetera, I'm still going to go buy one. I'm going to buy one and make them weird colors and use them in different situations around my dog.
Yep. It's going to change the way your voice sounds. It is going to muffle your voice. And I expect maybe make it a little harder for your dog to tell exactly where it's coming from.
It does. For me, the big one I think about a lot is the facial expression.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, how much our dogs key in on our facial expression. And, I don't know how much they do, but it is going to alter it. And so if your dog has any sort of...
Even between people, I can't tell if people are smiling or not. You tell a joke and everybody's just looking at you and you're like, I did.
You start to look at the eyes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about what we know about different organizations, at least here in the United States, in terms of what to expect. So both the AKC and the USDA have put out recommended best practices. These recommended best practices do include wearing masks on site, not necessarily for the one person running, but for all of the ring crew, everybody who's walking around and all of that. But these are not rules. They are not set down at the organization level. They are a guide for clubs to use, but nothing, to my knowledge, from either organization is required. It is up to the club. Now, at the club level, clubs can decide you must wear a mask. I mean, they can decide anything they want. What I have seen in premiums, I have seen some clubs that say it's optional for everybody. Nobody has to wear it. Ring crew doesn't have to wear it. Competitors don't have to wear it. The judge doesn't have to wear it. It's all optional, totally up to the person. I have seen clubs where it is required for everybody on the showgrounds except for the person running. They may take it off when they run, put it back on when they're done running. And I have seen it where it is required for everybody, including the runner. So those are basically what you're going to see. Those are the types of requirements that are going to be in place. But again, at the AKC and USDA, it is going to be up to the clubs. Now, CPE as an organization has decided that masks are required for everybody, including the runner. So if that is your organization, you need to be working on your mask. And I believe it was through December something, maybe through the end of the year. I know it was December 2020. They were saying these rules are in place at least until then, unless some other guidelines come out before then.
Okay, I want to close with a discussion about CPE, and I was really impressed with some of the stuff that they put out. And they're an organization here in the United States, and one thing they did was kind of give a statement of their philosophy. And they had this great line: as dog sports are very social, quote unquote social, we are choosing not to use the term social distancing. Rather, they want to refer to it as physical distancing. And I think this makes a really great point. So much of what we do in dog agility is social. And we're finding out about that now. This pandemic is confirming that. We're all doing dog agility at home, assuming we have equipment, space, things like that. There's a lot of things we can do at home, continue our training, social media, online classes. That has made all of that possible. But we're all still missing that really social aspect, even though we're getting a lot of social stuff through social media. So I like that, making the distinction between the social and physical distancing. Let's not distance ourselves socially. Let's, stay together as a community. And one of the ways we do that is by confronting this mask issue that right now is a little bit of a political hot potato, and turn it into a cohesive thing that brings us all together. We all understand that if we're going to do this sport, if we're going to save this sport, if we are going to bring this sport back in a couple of years, that we are going to have to get through this very difficult time. We're going to have to come together and not divide ourselves over the issue of a mask, but we need to understand why we're doing it, why it's helpful, how we can do it right. And I think that's something that everyone can come together socially and get done. I think that it was very cool that they made the statement. CPE did. Make sure your dog is okay with people wearing masks. We don't want a dog becoming fearful due to something they've never seen before. And what this does in my mind is this organization, it's a strong signal, and it's a signal that they care about the dog, right? Not just the competitor. I feel like they do care about the competitor very much so, because, they're having everybody wear the mask. But they also care about the dog, and they also care about their community. In just these couple of sentences, the guidelines that they put out on May 11th, you see all three, right? The exhibitor, the competitor, the people working there, the community as a whole, and the dogs. So I think that's a real model for how we all move together on this.
All right. So we hope that this brought a lot of information to the issue. This is something that we know that we're going to have to deal with as a community. And so we wanted to put together what we know, what we've researched in terms of how we can use masks to best protect ourselves, why we're doing it, and then also highlight what you are likely to see in agility as you go back to trialing, and how you can keep yourself and others safe. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this podcast, hititboard.com. Happy training.
What do you call a boomerang that won't come back? A stick.